Hi, and welcome to another episode presented by yours truly, Cryptids Roost. Please be so kind as to throat punch the like button, and don't forget to smack the ass of the subscription button as well. This will help with YouTube's algorithm and will help promote the channel more. If you would like to support this channel and help make it grow, any donations can be made to paypal.me/cryptidsroost and would be gratefully received. Don't forget to check out the merch store. All links will be listed below. So grab your coffee, sit back and enjoy the show. My job requires me to clean up Roadkill and hunt Cryptids, Part 3. This fantastic series is written by author Jojo, a wonderful author over on Reddit's NoSleep. Some cryptids are only classified as such for sake of convenience. There are several categories you'll come across. Physical cryptids are your most common. That's where you get your Mile wolves and your Loch Ness monsters. This category makes up the majority of my calls, but almost all of them can be killed with minimal effort. Then you have intangible cryptids. You could technically call these things ghosts, but they are just a subset of creatures that seem to exist without a form. I've only ever had to deal with one of these. It was shortly after I first began this job. I was called to the suburbs to a nuclear family's ranch house. When I arrived, the scene looked like it was straight out of The Exorcist. All their belongings were thrown to the ground and parts of the walls were dented. The kids were beside themselves. It was like the lichen collie. A very interesting study. It creeps the notion of its existence into an underdeveloped mind, mostly children. Slowly it manipulates more and more around the child until they are either convinced they have an imaginary friend or they believe a monster is in their closet. From there it can begin attempting to manifest itself into a more physical plane. Some of these guys will make you question the world around you, but it's a slippery slope and one I avoid. These type of cryptids require more and more out-of-the-box solutions. For example, while the mother pulled her children from the house to avoid the lichen collie, me and the father put on a show. The lichen collie always appears the same no matter the host. It shows itself initially as a yellow teddy bear, but as the child interacts with the lichen collie, the bear will stretch, its limbs contort in a sick attempt to imitate a human form, and its button eyes sink deep into the plush skull. The bear's skin will turn from a bright, vibrant yellow to a dirty tan. Its fur will be matted and ripped off in patches. Before I arrived at the house, I had stitched together a bodysuit that resembled the lichen collie as much as I could. I'm no tailor, but it was enough. I pulled the suit on and walked by a few windows to show the children I was inside the house. I made my way to the front door and stepped out, doing my best impressions of a thoughtless form I just walked down the sidewalk. The children were crying and begging for their mother to run with them. Just as one of the children were about to take off, the father tackled me from behind and slammed me onto the pavement. I told him to sell it, but the bruises from hitting the sidewalk remained on my elbow for what felt like weeks. He spouted lines about how I could never scare his family again and how I was going to jail for a long time. The bear mask I had made was then pulled off, revealing my face to the children. Staring at the little girl, I could see the gears turning. The bear she had been seeing wasn't some psychic vampire. It was just some weirdo in a costume who was going to jail for the rest of their life. She was no longer convinced the lichen collie was anything more than that, and as such, it would vanish from her thoughts. Other cryptids act similarly to the lichen collie, but do so in more of an immediate physical fashion. These are affliction cryptids. In this category are things like fast jackets, hornet doves, and the Calvia contaminant. Very few things can shut down an entire mile radius as a Calvia contaminant can, and that was the subject of my call tonight. For a rare night, I wasn't going to need much physical prowess to deal with a cryptid. So after I had obsessively treated my wounds, furballs can be dirty little things, I started preparing for the hunt, although cleanse would be more of an accurate word. The call had informed me the inner city had several blocks shut down and under quarantine. Victims were reporting advanced flu-like symptoms, and the skin was showing signs of a rapid decay at a cellular level. Sightings of bizarre animal behaviour and appearance were also a cause for concern. Me and my employer knew that simply quarantining the area wouldn't suffice. All it would take is one rat slipping out to infect another area. I threw on a heavy hazmat suit and headed out. The more time I wasted, the more I risked a citywide infection. Like I said, Elvis can haul ass, and with me driving the roads as much as I do every day, I have pretty good intuition on which ones I can press the pedal down on. Elvis roared down the side streets. I didn't bother checking the side of the road. If something wanted to jump out at me, Elvis would be sure to take care of it. The bag of supplies resting on the passenger seat rattled and clanged with every bump Elvis took on. I don't normally venture too far into the city. I used to though years ago. I would spend entire weekends just fooling around. That life is something I've had to leave far behind, and memories of it serve me little purpose, but at the very least I knew where I was going. I'd find the afflicted area shortly after entering the city. It wasn't hard to spot all the yellow tape and no entry signs littered around. I parked a few blocks away before leaving. I had scrubbed the hell out of Elvis. He looked cleaner than the day I bought him. If there was even a hair of something that was once organic around the infection site, then I would just cause more problems than I solve. The place was in a complete shutdown. Even the street lights had been shut off. The city must have blacked out part of its grid, which was smart. Sounds and light could attract things like insects, things the caviar contaminant absolutely love. Carefully, I've made my way from building to building, trying to find the source of the contaminant. This affliction cryptid works similar to the hive mind of bees. If it weren't for that, it'd probably be an extinction level cryptid running rampant from state to state. Unfortunately, there is no known cure other than shutting down the hive mind before it takes too many victims. The source will send out a mist of spores that will attach to any organic life and start to absorb it for energy that will then be converted into more spores. The whole quarantine zone had a thick green hue to it, as though I was swimming through swamp water. I could see the semi-intelligent spores swirling from house to house to meal. The cowboy contaminant was aware of my presence as the cloud grew ever so thick around me. The spores were looking for any imperfection in the space. I could hear rats and other small critters scurrying about. I came across one such rat convulsing in the corner of a shut-down mini-mart. Its skin was being eaten away in several spots, revealing its bones and inner workings. Each hole was outlined by an almost neon green light. As the contaminant eats away, it glows from the energy it receives. This, however, was not the host, so I moved on. Buildings were either completely vacant or had small animals I would have to stop and observe. If they were small enough, I could just move on, but anything that could host the membrane would have to be examined. This includes getting really up close and personal with the inflicted and cutting it open to get a good look. Or if the decay was severe enough, I could just tell from a glance that nothing was abnormal inside. I knew people were sick and on the verge of death, so I tried to hurry, but something as simple as tripping up or snagging my suit on a loose nail would cause the whole hunt to be a bust. After a few blocks had been cleared, I was convinced I had missed something, or just wasn't thorough enough with what I did come across. I only had a few houses left. I figured I could clear them and just double back. I found something rather unexpected though. The decaying body of another cryptid was being converted to energy. It was just lying on the sidewalk. Another mile wolf laid at my feet, this one smaller than the last by at least a foot. I cursed myself for not bringing the revolver from my truck so I could give this thing a swift death. Until I cleared the contaminant source, this one would have to suffer the waging war of its regeneration and Calvia's feeding process. At least the virus didn't latch onto the marlwolf. The Calvia contaminant has a nasty habit of making its epicenter host somewhat immortal. As I stood observing the marlwolf, not wanting to get too close in case it had enough energy to spring up and attack the nearest piece of meat, I heard a familiar clacking in the street behind me. Slowly I turned to face what I swiftly knew to be the epicenter host. The large adult buck before me stood with a vapor of green spores pluming from its wounds. The buck stared at me like I had my high beams on, its ears twitching at every scuff I made moving forward. I had no idea how I was expected to handle something so massive and powerful, let alone get to the source inside it. I could just barely see it as I carefully approached the buck. Inside one of the open sores adorning the massive buck's stomach was an obnoxiously green, tumorous mass clinging to the buck's intestinal tract. The virus needed to be soaked in a flammable delivery of antibiotics, heavy ones, which needed to be set aflame by direct contact with an open flame. How I was going to do any of this was beyond me. Each time I closed in on the buck, it would turn and gain several more feet of distance between us, which was honestly more favourable than the muscled Goliath goring me through with his massive antlers. They were intricate and imposing. This guy was for sure an alpha male. Poor thing. My attempts at a peaceful approach weren't working as I was running out of time. The people in hospital beds were running out of time. Those around them didn't know the infected were exhaling clouds of spores so small in number that they were barely visible, were running out of time. I knew something about my appearance was throwing it off. I knew what that something was. It wasn't hostile towards me, but it was cautious of something it didn't know. Any attempt to speed up was no doubt going to result in the buck just trotting off. The virus has no effect on the host's cognitive functions, so the buck was going to act how it always had. It's sights like this that eats away at me. Such a proud and strong member of the ecosystem was reduced to nothing but a carrier. Its skin a patchwork of brown and green linings. Its neck only minutes away from being unable to support the weight of its antlers. Sometimes on this job you have to forsake every safety measure you've built up. You have to take a gentle approach, like putting on a show to get a little girl to know the bad man is gone. Sometimes you have to be the bad man. I clasped my hands around the hood of my hazmat suit once white, now stained a deep green, with patches of spores stuck to it. Lifting up, I felt the spore-filled air swirling around my head. Every inhale felt like I was breathing soup. I tore away the rest of my suit until I was standing in just my t-shirt and jeans. The virus was in me now, filling every organ and pore the spores could wiggle their way into. It was warm, and within minutes the spores would begin feeding. Luckily, the lining of human organs is tough for them to get through, so I had a little time before irreversible damage occurred. Cautiously stepping forward with an outstretched arm, I closed the gap between me and patient zero. Its body made the motions to turn, but with a few clicks, like I was calling a cat, I acquired its attention until I could see my reflection in its eyes. Gently I brushed what patches of intact fur I could find until the buck was motionless. Freehand grabbing the bottle of liquid, I continued soothing the buck. The lid slipped off and the antibiotics applied directly to the green mass. Best efforts were kept to keep the liquid from directly impacting the buck's remaining nerves. It would surely set the beast off. I had forgotten the flare. It was taped to the hazmat suit. I backed up, clicking once more, and the buck, thank God, it followed. We danced together until I felt the suit at my feet. Kneeling down, I picked up the red flare and cracked it. A bright red cast its light on me and the buck. Then the light disappeared as it was being shoved into the calvier contaminant. Sparks of it would flick and burn onto my hands, but I had to remain steady until the flare burnt out. It was reacting with the antibiotics, stripping its exterior of the viscous liquid that caused the infection and boiling the interior until all the spores had turned into an inactive mush. Shortly after, the buck dropped to the ground, its antlers smacking against the pavement. The green spores around me began dropping just the same. I felt bad for the buck, I really did. But if you need some solace, I could see that not even the virus was able to eat away at its impressive show of antlers. Body feeling like hell, like it did back when I would have to go 10 rounds with more than just a punching bag, I grabbed the suit, now completely useless, and pulled the green mess from inside the buck. It was dormant now, but inside the slush of spores was a highly potent poison. This might be useful with handling future cryptids. I then made my way to the truck. The authorities would discover on their own that the area was clear, and I'd be called in the morning to remove the animals. I'd have done it tonight, but my energy was quite literally drained. When I arrived at the truck, I noticed that its driver's side door had been left completely open, which is something my neurotic mind would never do. I searched the interior and found nothing missing, until on a whim I checked where I stored my revolver. Instead of a shining metal handgun, I was left with a small silver pellet, one I had forgotten to recover from the mile wolf hunt. I know when to leave a situation, and when I happened to glance at my passenger side window to see a distant pair of yellow orbs watching me, I left the scene. Even on the drive home, I could see the same pair of yellow eyes every few miles. Once I got home, on my doorstep was a shining metal revolver, or as I now saw it, a warning. Wow, that was a fantastic story. And if you enjoyed listening to this chronicle, be sure to pop over to the author's Reddit profile, author Jojo, and drop them a line, or even give them a glowing review. The link to their Reddit profile will be below in the description. And if you enjoyed my narration, then please feel free to like and share the video, leave a comment below, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and tap the notification bell and then select all. That way you'll receive all notifications each time I upload a new video. Please be so kind as to visit our merchandise store and grab yourself a t-shirt, face mask, mug, hoodie, or whatever else grabs your fancy. There's plenty there to choose from. The link will be in the description. And if you'd like an honourable mention, send in a snapshot of yourself with your purchase from the merch store, and I'll feature it in one of my videos. You can submit your stories and encounters to cryptidsroost@gmail.com. And if you wish to remain anonymous, that's fine with me. Now, I've also got a Facebook group, Twitter, Reddit, and you'll also find me on Discord. And if you'd like to support this channel and help make it grow, my PayPal is paypal.me/cryptidsroost. Again, that'll also be below. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not.